You right all? So, I'll say I'm back. The Wanderer returns, shall we say. So I'll start with the video that I made before I left. Turns out that was, I wouldn't go as far as saying a load of nonsense, but it was, it didn't happen. You know, obviously I didn't end up stuck in America. You know, I'm back on British soil, which was nice. With that being said, it was quite ironic really, because I didn't really want to leave Britain to go to America, and I didn't really want to leave America to go back to Britain, because I was quite sold on the American way of life. There's a lot of things about America that I like, but there's also a lot of things about Britain that I like. There's good and bad parts. I mean, so I'll start with a few good points for the US. I personally am fully on board with their Second Amendment. Most people in Britain, they don't really understand the importance of having weapons and having an armed society. And I can respect the points that they make with regards to the massacres that happen from time to time, the fact that absolute lunatics with grudges against certain groups of people decide to go and get weapons and unleash their anger on them. But with that being said, I like to use the movie Falling Down as a good analogy. So Michael Douglas, when he goes on his rampage through the town, and he holds Wimpy to ransom. Now, in the scenario that happens, a bad person could have just got hold of that weapon anywhere, and at least the people in that restaurant can defend themselves potentially. Because if they're all armed, obviously Michael Douglas would end up in a worse situation. So there's a little example there. Along with regards to the farming way of life and the space and the land that they've got, I'm also a big fan of that. So most of England is quite a congested, concentrated country nowadays, and with America in the countryside, there's lots of room between all their ranches. It's still got people out there, but there's just so much land available. And if you wanted to live that self-sustainable, sort of off-grid lifestyle, that can be achieved much easier out there than it can back here. Another thing I like is just the sheer size of the continent, let alone the country. I mean, where I was in Louisiana, obviously deep south, United States, near Texas, well, bordering Texas and Georgia, that sort of region, you could easily fit England or Britain into that area. You know, if you did the square mile thing and squeezed it all in there, you could easily achieve that. So, you know, the room you've got, and the fact that with Britain, it's a small island at the end of the day, and if the government ever decides to become really tyrannical, you know, you're stuck on a little island with a limited amount of space and room, you know, because you've got the sea blocking you off, obviously being an island. So there's that. So yeah, again, there's another thing I'm a big fan with, you know, the United States. There's lots of room to get around, you know. Texas, I think, is about Texas is obviously just a state, and it's 3 times the size of Britain. That's incredible, really, when you think about the sheer size of it. That being said, a few things I don't like. So the food would definitely be one. A lot of their food is just absolutely rammed with sugar. Ours is bad in the UK, but not to the same extent as theirs is. For example, I looked at a can of Red Bull when I was out there, and I think it had about 63 grams of sugar, whereas in the UK you're probably talking about 30. We've also got this thing, that's just one example, the list is endless, you know. Also on top of that you've got this thing called Red 40, which is I think it's used for like, you know, like dyeing the, colouring the food basically. So like a pack of Doritos, for example, if you look in the small print on the ingredients, you know, it's there, red 40, yellow 5, all these colourings. Well, red 40 has been banned in the UK. and I looked it up online. Apparently it's linked to all sorts of behavioural mental health sort of problems, so nasty stuff. And then also you've got sorry, I lost my train of thought there. You've also got corn syrup, that's what I was thinking of. So apparently corn syrup, so even I was eating quite a bit of corn out there instead of crisps, because the crisps have got red 40 in them. The drinks have obviously got sugar in them, far too much sugar in them, to the point where it makes you feel sick afterwards. So I've moved to like corn, but I didn't know about this corn syrup. Apparently that's been banned in the UK as well. Apparently that's a bad thing. So the thing is with people often say that Americans are a bit crazy. I don't really know if I agree with that, to be honest. I think it's the same as anywhere, good and bad. But I have to say, you are what you eat. So I genuinely feel like a lot of them are being poisoned with their sort of supermarket corner shop food. The fast food with all the packaging is dreadful. That being said, on the good side of food, if you've got the money, going to somewhere like New Orleans, it's all very seafood orientated. You could even eat alligator, which I didn't, because I find it quite ironic that people will look at alligators as being like deadly monsters and fucking out, and then we're the ones eating them. So you can't really be upset if an alligator decided to eat you or attack you when you're eating them yourselves. So I didn't try it. I didn't really agree with it, but it's their culture. It's up to them. I don't really agree with crocodile farms and alligator farms, and I suppose if you caught it in the wild, fair play. But still, I'm pescatarian, but prawns and fish is the kind of food I'll eat only, really. What else we got? Yeah, I suppose obviously I sort of hinted about money is a big thing out there. So it's quite expensive, I'd say, to live out there. With the food, they've got the same sort of problems going on over there with high taxes. It's all across the West, all that sort of stuff. And it's quite funny because a lot of Americans I spoke to were potentially keen to move to Britain or to Europe. But ironically, I'll be quite keen on moving out there, to be honest. It's really been sold to me, but watching some of these YouTube videos, the usual doom and gloom videos that kind of probably made me think that some big disaster was going to happen while I was out there. They're talking about the potential for a civil unrest after the elections, either way it goes. So if Trump gets in, there's always a potential for them, the lefties, to kick off, and but if Harris gets in, we've got the potential for, I suppose you call it, the right wing could kick off. And the lefties are naturally very violent, aggressive people, mentally unhinged, which we've seen at these Antifa Palestine sort of protests, and they're like programmed on over like the old NPC thing, not much going on behind the eyes. With the guys and girls that will kick off on the right wing side of things, well, I would say it's a bit like the civil unrest that kicked off in England, during the summer, because people feel completely helpless now. The system is completely doing everything it possibly can to replace. You can't really say the original population in America, but certainly in Europe, they are doing everything they possibly can in Western Europe to replace us. They want to breed us out of existence and turn us into like a mixed race population. With America, well, to be fair, America, Australia, Canada, by America I mean USA, obviously. Well, who built it is the thing I always ask. Who built the USA? Who built Australia? It certainly wasn't the native Indians, was it, or the Mexicans? It's the European innovation and architecture that created all that. But so you can say we, in some ways, are sort of like the original native population, because at least we built it. A funny observation I made when I was out there, in fact, you ever look at the dollar sign and just notice it looks a bit like a snake wrapped around a branch? you know, like a serpent in the Garden of Eden or something. So it's got an S, and then obviously the two lines running vertical. That to me looks a lot like a serpent wrapped around a branch, and that's another thing with both Britain and America. They're like big businesses now. It's not really, at least with England, I suppose we've got all the culture and history behind it all. But America really hasn't got that, you know, and that's why on the outskirts of towns and cities, on the highways, freeways, whatever they call them, they're so ugly. You know, a lot of these towns and cities are so ugly. It's just like a McDonald's, a Taco Bell, what's the other one? Is it Popeyes? Like these fast food restaurants, KFC, Burger King, all the same sort of stuff. And you know, Britain unfortunately has gone the same way, you know, because the Americanisation has taken over. But I suppose at least with us, we've got the lovely old world, you know, just above it to look at, whereas they don't really have that. So yeah, there's a few observations there. Also, looking back on the flight, so when I left England, you know, we're looking out onto the countryside and looking out onto all the nice fields, you know. Very domesticated, though, has to be said. You can tell it's really, there's not much that's been left wild. Even the woodblocks are clearly, you know, sort of constructed by man and had a lot of influence by human beings. With the US, when we came in towards the US, the one thing that really struck me is how wild it all looked. You know, it was untamed, basically. Hang on a sec. Yeah, so I'm just going past Stansted now. Yeah, so, which is quite convenient talking about the airport side of things. So yeah, when looking down on the countryside, it's all domesticated, all the fields, but first sightings of America, of the US, very wild. You know, like little hills with woods and with wood blocks that have clearly been left untamed, been left to their own devices, and a lot of space. I was expecting to come in and just see, like I did on the way back, to be fair, I did see the other side, which was what I was expecting, was like a big urban hellhole with no trees, no fields, just a huge massive concrete, which was in the form of New York. On the way back, I think we saw New York and I think Newark, maybe. It's all them East Coast sort of towns and cities, but they really were like what I'd expect to see when I arrived, just a big concrete hellhole. But in reality, there's so much space and land and countryside that's been left, let alone before you mention like the western side, which is mainly desert, and you know, the where we were is mainly lush green sort of jungle sort of countryside. And that's another thing, the weather out there. So the weather was a mixed bag really. Vast majority of the time extremely warm, you know, we're talking 30 degrees, 32 degrees, very sunny, very hot, very humid as well, so your sweat doesn't really have a desired effect on you, so it doesn't really cool you down as much as it would do in, say, dry heat, as it would do in the UK, obviously. And with that being said, when it rains out there down in the south, it rains like nothing you'd ever see in the UK. It's so heavy, it's like, and it lasts for a good hour or so. And when it rains, it is just unbelievably heavy. With that being said, there was a couple of storms out there when I was there. So my suspicions and concerns, there was some truth in it. You know, there's at least 2 storms within the final week I was there, and you know, we were wondering about the flight coming back, etc., with the storm going on, and also with the election stuff just around the corner. There's always that potential for that country to kick off big time. But anyway, yeah, so there was 2 storms in the final week. One was North Carolina. I think it went from the Gulf of Mexico towards Georgia, Alabama, and then up to North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, and that caused utter destruction in North Carolina. You know, because a lot of their houses are made out of wood, I noticed, They seem to withstand the vast majority of the bad weather, but it's still quite fragile compared to an English terraced concrete house, from the Victorian age. And that's the thing, a lot of their architecture is quite fragile in that regard. But there's still a lot of nice old buildings like you saw in Leesville, a lot of sort of Georgian looking architecture. What else you got? With the other storm that went to Florida, was it Milton? I think it might have been called. Obviously that was a bad one, and so we do get storms down there, obviously, and North America, like New York, etc. I've never been there, flown over it now, but they get quite bad snow, don't they, when winter swings around. So the weather side of it, it's a bit of a mixed bag. But that leads me on to, the stuff that the planes spray in the sky. Again, that was quite a strange mixture. They do it differently over there as well, I've noticed. So coming in towards the US, it was obvious that the trails were the trails were quite high, whereas in England, obviously, they're quite low. Like last night was horrendous. You had that big supermoon, but you could barely see it because the amount of crap that had been left in the sky by the planes. And but out there, they seem to spray it really high, but the clouds are really low. So you've got natural clouds quite low, and then the artificial ones that the planes create quite high. And but that being said, I would say they get it a lot less than we do in the UK, and perhaps even Europe. We seem to get it a lot worse, I'd say, with regards to what they spray on us. So it still goes on, but I don't think on quite the same scale, because, like I said, with America, a lot of it's spread out. So it's not like Japan, for example, where everyone's congested into Tokyo. It's spread out. Generally, I enjoyed it, and I'd certainly go back. I could easily live out there, could easily have a ranch with a couple of guns and a family and protect myself. But then again, I suppose you're getting taxed out there in the same way that we are over here. Someone actually asked me, a lady actually asked me what the British perception is of America. I think she was more regarding towards the elections. And with regards to that lady, I never really gave a very good answer, because I started talking more about England. So basically my point to her was that American politics, English politics, British, we've got the same problems. We've got very similar problems in the fact that we've got the extremely far left mindset now running our countries. It's this extremely liberal view of how things should be, and anyone who dares to question it, is called racist, xenophobic, transphobic, homophobic, blah blah blah, all the usual worn out, boring slander words, but it's just a way of keeping people quiet. Basically, it's just a way to try and keep people quiet. Now, to give her an answer of what I thought about America, of course, another option would be, well, when I flew in, my thoughts of the place were kind of confirmed when we were driving towards the hotel when we first got there, and that was in the fact that it is quite ugly and modern. So we had the huge American flag, the Star Spangled Banner, I think it's called, flying above the retail parks. And it's like really, I can understand like a St. George flying next to an old grand cathedral or a church or a Tudor building, or a Georgian town hall, but fucking hell, I just thought that is so what I'd expect, of America, like a big, huge flag of patriotism and pride flying over a retail park, of like Costa and McDonald's, and I mean, it's not really anything to be proud of, that sort of culture, is it? So yeah, and also it kind of reminded me a little bit of Idiocracy with like the advertising advertising billboards on the freeways, highways, whatever you call them, and with that, there's a big deer on the side there. Also with regards to their advertising and billboards on the side of the road, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Better Call Saul, because nearly every second billboard was a lawyer. So what was one of them? Been in a jam, call Sam. Been in a crash, you need to call Dash. That sort of stuff. It's all it's just a big business, isn't it? Really, it's not really any soul in that country as such. It's just a massive business that shot up within the space of a couple hundred years. They haven't got quite the same depth of culture and history we have. That being said, their cultural side with regards to the rodeo that I went and documented, another day, it looks a bit more like a dog. A lot of roadkill on the road today. But yeah, the rodeo, that's their deep south culture. But what I will say is that there's a mixture of attitudes towards British people. I don't really think they particularly like us, A lot of them are Irish descended as well. And you've got the whole 1776 thing, which is their big thing they always go on about. It's like where they, began their supposed independence. Ironically, they're not independent now because the Federal Reserve is strangling that country as much as you can imagine. Because, as we know, all the money that gets printed off is loaned out to the government, with interest, and that's why the huge $8 trillion debt, I think it is on the American government, which can't possibly reverse because, like Rothschild said, just round about the Waterloo, he didn't care who made the laws and the policies of the country, it was who owned the money supply, and if they own the money supply, they own the country. So, not to get too sucked into that rabbit hole, so you're not really free at all, and like Bill Hicks put it perfectly, you're free to do as I tell you. There's a limit to freedoms you're given, but there are a lot of points where I think you're a lot freer than we are in the UK. That being said, I watched a good video by an American lady living in Britain yesterday, and she was saying how she feels freer in the UK. For example, you can often walk across private fields because of public rights of way and public footpaths, whereas in America you wouldn't be able to do that. Private land is private land. So you don't have the same freedom to just go wandering around. And let's face it, the world generally is all the same now. It's like a big, everything's controlled, everything's governed. And it's like George Carlin said, the powers that shouldn't be, they own all the important land, and they do. You're given like free range fucking chickens or sheep, you're given certain areas you can go, certain areas you can't go. You're not really free, and this is the end result of overpopulation and civilization. But again, I don't want to get too dragged into that sort of stuff. I just want to keep it within America. I think another thing I do like about their culture, though, they're very patriotic. So they do like the flag. There's huge, enormous flags that you'd never see flags that size in the UK. Like the rodeo, that flag must have been the size of a swimming pool, like a 25-metre swimming pool. We're a bit more humble in the UK. I think we're a bit more reserved about patriotism. There's still a certain pride in our nation, but we have been, I suppose you could call it in some ways, Americanised, because America doesn't really have a solid defining ethnic group of people that can truly call themselves American. The Native Indians, yeah, alright, but then again, the Europeans that came and built America, they can also claim, because they built it after all. With regards to the African Americans, well, they were brought over as slaves, so I can see why African Americans would perhaps never really want to fully identify as Americans. Some of them do, some of them have still got a grudge about it, and you can't really say anything about that because there is a lot of truth to it, really. But what I will say, like I said to somebody out there, when were you ever a direct victim of slavery? because they're not, and it's time to move on from that, and I'd say grow up a little bit and move on, you know, with what you've got now, because you've got as much opportunities as any white European American. And also I think it needs remembering, I learned a bit about the European settlers that went there, and it wasn't easy to build that country. I mean, think how much fighting and building, and fucking hell, imagine the first time you go for a swim in a river or a lake and you come across alligators and crocodiles and snakes, and you know, they had to learn about these environments. It wasn't just given to them. So yeah, there's another thing. I think there needs to be some acknowledgement for the hard work, you know, that was conducted to build that country from both sides. The Europeans didn't have it all easy either. What about the Irish slaves? They had it as well. Yeah, so the patriotism is a good thing, but with that being said, I think their culture is very young. You know, it's only a couple of 100 years old, and that's why they cling on to the whole 1776 thing is such a big deal to them. But they cling on to it, and with that, some of them have a bit of a chip on the shoulder towards the British. Not many, but I could certainly get that vibe with some people in the working environment. But when I went to Leesville, everyone was friendly, polite, you know, it was okay. I've got nothing bad to say about them. And there we go, loads of traffic around Braintree. So I suppose that leads me on to the roads. The roads are quite an interesting mixture, because like England with the old country roads, you know, they had a lot of space on these country roads, more than you'd imagine in the UK. So there was a good point where we couldn't see any vehicles for a good mile during the middle of the day. This is as well in the afternoon, but getting to the towns and cities, and it's extremely busy, congested. So yeah, you know, similar to UK, I guess. You know, obviously cities are where people live, so there's that parallel there. But everything's just on a bigger scale, isn't it? So also something I thought was quite interesting out there was to ask people what they made of the old Cough Cough 2020 situation. How was it over there? We went out drinking in New Orleans, you know, down Bourbon Street, whatever you call it. That strip to me is just a generic. It was good. I've got nothing to say bad about it, but I'm experienced in this sort of stuff. I've been down Malia, Zante, Thailand, Walking Street. You know, I've seen enough strips, and it's exactly the same. It's just a big strip to go up and down and get pissed, isn't it? Really, you know, there's enough of them. And but one thing that was good about it was the rock and roll bars and the Irish music, and there's a good mixture of music available. You know, there's an area where a lot of black people congregate, you know, hip hop, R&B and twerking, and but then you notice the white people are going to like the rock and roll bars, and yeah, and like the Irish music bars. So natural, again, that is the whole multicultural thing. We are different. We like different musics. We like different humours. We're different. It's just nature. You know, we evolved in different areas of the world. So we're not better. We're not worse. We are different, though, and that's why multiculturalism doesn't work. You know, it's forcing people together who are different and trying to make them all the same. So anyway, I've said it. But I got talking to this lady outside one of the bars, and turned out she was a nurse, so I couldn't resist asking what she made of it all. What did she think looking back on it? And to be fair, like a lot of nurses, they always say that it was busy during that time period. You know, I can't really, we're not obviously in on some big global conspiracy, should we call it. You know, that maybe they're being sincere, maybe the hospitals were busy, maybe there was problems in the early stages. But then that doesn't really explain all the TikTok videos in other hospitals. I suppose each hospital maybe was different, I don't know. But anyway, she said that she didn't really buy into the whole poke in the arm thing, and looking back she wished she hadn't taken it, as a lot of people do now. Yeah, so there's plenty of switched on Americans, I have to say, as well. They were quite clued up about the whole tracking thing, because they're marching towards the cashless society as quickly as we are, and you know, a lot of them are wising up to the fact that it's all to do with tracking people, and so there's plenty of switched on people out there, the same as there is in England. You know, it's a mixture. There's some people who are dumbed down, and there's plenty of people who are switched on as well. So that was good. I think this will be the final section of the video, because it's going to be a long one otherwise. It's long enough as it is. So I think the final thing really is getting back to the UK. I'm surprised how warm it is. You know, the weather out there was good 30 odd degrees. You know, coming back to the UK, it's 17 degrees in autumn. You know, I'm still walking around in shorts and t-shirt and not really feeling the heat. So I don't know if that's to do with me being used to cold showers now and all that sort of stuff, or whether that's just generally quite warm for this time of year. You know, I was surprised all the leaves are still on the trees. I was expecting to come back and it'd be more November, December sort of weather, but obviously we're in October, mid-October, so it will be still quite warm. You know, we're only a month on from the equinox. And with regards to the photography thing, has to be said, you know, I've been back a week now, so I've had a bit of a break, get settled back in. But I'm in a funny position now, I've noticed. There's not really that much left to do now. I think I will keep going, obviously, but it does feel like I've kind of done, because I worked so hard to get everything finished before I left, because I thought this was my last chance. So I really went to really pushing myself hard, and it's kind of done now. Like, most of Eastern England's done, most of the Midlands are done. You know, a bit of the West Country still got to go, south as well. That doesn't really appeal to me as much as the other areas, but I'll still go ahead and do it. But things are definitely going to start calming down over the next year or two, and I think the way it's going, I'll be able to say that, you know, I've documented most of England in these funny times that we live in. With America, I'd love to go out there and photograph different areas. You know, I'd love to go and do Chicago, New York, you know, the northern areas, some of the western places like Las Vegas and San Francisco. But it has to be said, you know, outside the touristy areas, they are complete shitholes. You know, enough videos on YouTube will clarify that point to me. But that's one final point I'll make actually before I knock it on the head. This, what should we call it, genre of like proper doom and gloom videos that everywhere's dangerous, you can't go here, you can't go there. It's not good, because, for example, New Orleans, I was considering going there on my own, you know, because I know there's a lot of nice old architecture there, and the cultural part, there's plenty of it. It's got a very dark gothic theme to the area. It's all very vampire cafes, and it reminded me of the original Blade movie, you know, where you got all the vampires underground clubbing. You know, so there is probably an even darker side to it that we don't. There's probably a bit of a mischievous dark side to it on the surface level, but it could be a much darker side just below the surface level. So I was going to with that doom and gloom business. I call it an industry. It's like a doom and gloom industry on YouTube, with people going around, I've been to the most dangerous place here, or the murder capital of America, and, you know, the no-go zones in Britain. And yeah, on the outskirts that's probably the case, but inner towns and cities, I would imagine big business, i.e. probably the mafia, big corporations, they own inner towns and cities, and they won't tolerate that stuff because it'll drive customers away. So if you go into their area causing problems, you probably won't last long. So you're kind of protected within these towns and cities in some ways. They, like New Orleans, so basically it was, I saw a video on YouTube, it's like the murder capital of America, and you know, you watch a couple of videos and it's like, fucking hell, no chance of going there on my own, I won't come back. And then if you actually go there and you actually have a walk around, it's fine. You know, a bit of common sense, you don't go wandering around the hoods or the suburbs. But even then, you probably just get curious questions of who you are, what you're up to. You know, particularly with being a foreign accent, it'd probably just be general curiosity of who you are and what's brought you to the area. So, yeah, I just wouldn't buy into this this stuff too much, because you can end up just living in total fear otherwise. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite well travelled now. I've been around to the areas of East End of London that are supposedly bad. I've still got to do Croydon maybe one day. South London, that's meant to be a lot worse. Yeah, a final point, just be wary. I never fully trusted anybody out in America, and I think that was a wise thing to always keep that, what would you call it, like a boundary of not being too trusting. But I do that in the UK as well. You should never trust anyone too much, because I think it was Steve Irwin that said, animals are easy because you know where you stand with them. You either want to kill you or get away from you. But humans are very difficult and complicated, because they will try to be your friend first. They'll be smiley, shake your hands, but in reality they're thinking about getting one over on you or whatever, because we're capable of being devious and manipulative. Yeah, so I think that's really about it.